Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Longevanity, where we explore the intersection between health, wellness, looking great, and living a long, healthy, full life. My name's Amber Bocknek. I'm going to be walking you through this today. And here's the topic of the day. Have you ever been told your labs are normal, but you feel anything but normal? Things are going awry and you're looking for answers and just really getting frustrated. Well, today's conversation is going to be for you. But before we begin, a little bit of housekeeping. It's really important to please make note that these sessions really are indicated and intended to be for educational purposes only. They aren't meant to diagnose, treat, prevent, or cure any disease. And really, what they're meant to do is give you information to help you advocate for your best healthcare today and in the future. Please do take the information and the content that you hear today and bring this to your care provider because we really want to foster better conversations and ultimately help you get to your health goals. But today's topic is going to be an interesting one. We're going to chat a little bit about normal lab values and what that does and does not mean. So bear with me today. It's a lot of definitions and hopefully some useful information to help you frame things and ask more informed questions to, again, get where you need to be. So let's start. Normal values. Oh, you're normal. What exactly does that mean? It's really important to note, and it might be a bit of a surprise, that a normal lab value is really just a population statistic. It isn't about what's normal for you. It's not even about what's optimal for you. We'll talk about that in a second. That's another definition that's very critical to make. But normal values really comprise 95% of the population. And so when you think about it, 95% of the population, that's a lot of people. And again, that not necessarily be people who feel well or people who are really healthy. That's just all comers, like literally all comers. And so again, you have to keep that in mind. You're only abnormal if you are outside of that range. So the top 2.5% or the bottom 2.5%. So outside of that, you're normal. So that number may not represent at all how you feel. And let's look into that a little bit further. So again, if you were in the top 95th percentile in general, and now you aren't well and things have really changed, you could be in the bottom 10th percentile or 5th percentile. You'd still be considered normal, but lots has changed. And that may very well explain some of the story about what you're feeling. So normal doesn't mean necessarily well. It just means that, again, statistically, you're not in that top or bottom 2.5%. Normal values are really meant to help define clear-cut disease, but they don't very well indicate changes in function, particularly if they're looked at individually as opposed to over time. The other thing that's really important to know about lab work and lab values is they're only a snapshot in time, in that moment, on that day. And again, sometimes retesting over time is very critically important to make sure that, again, we have a good understanding of where you're at. The other important thing is that normal values, again, are driven from populations who are being tested. That's actually a really important point as well, too. Who gets tested? Well, unless they're going and sampling a group of people who identify as healthy normals, then the people who tend to be more going for blood work often are people who have a reason to go for blood work. They don't feel well. Something else is happening. And so again, there's a dominance of less healthy individuals in this cohort of people. So already the reference range might be skewed to look more at people who already are unhealthy because they're the ones going for testing when reference ranges are designed. Although, again, they do try to pre-select for healthier people. But these things have to be taken into consideration. So all of this is important when we're looking at lab work and doing lab considerations. So I'm just going to move the microphone here so it's not so crackly. So again, these are all really important considerations when we're looking at that. So this is the definition of normal. It's a population statistic reflecting 95% of the population and doesn't show you what you were before. It's just only compared to that group. So that's the first thing. The second thing to understand in all of this is this whole concept of optimal versus normal. So, again, even though we're looking at statistics of people, sometimes when people are in a certain part of the range, they may actually feel and perform better. Where when they're at the other end of the range, they might be the opposite. They're just not as good or at peak. So, optimal levels, different from normal levels, are very often in the normal range, but they're at what we would consider the good end. So, what's the good end? Well, that depends. The good end can sometimes be the top of the range. The good end can sometimes be the bottom of the range. And sometimes the good end is right in the middle, or what I call the Goldilocks zone. Not too hot, not too cold, or it's just right. So it does vary a little bit, but definitely looking at normal values, you really want to consider, well, what is the optimal value, as well as look at what is happening to you over time. So this is all just part of the beginning of the big picture. So that's part of it. Another part in all of this is, well, what actually comprises lab work that is comprehensive enough to give a good assessment? So sometimes, again, people go in and they talk about issues, they get a requisition for blood work, but it may not be easily or readily apparent what all is being checked. And it's really important that we're checking what is actually relevant to what is going on. So, comprehensive blood panels sometimes involve more than just a simple tick box on the sheet. I'll give you an example of this where we can see this more commonly. So, again, this is just one example. There are many, many other situations as well. In thyroid testing, many people complain of fatigue or notice changes and present to their primary care provider looking for some help to try to figure out why they're so tired. And in part of the normal conversation or consideration for the care provider, they may contemplate that thyroid might be playing a part of the problem or part of the role in all of this. So there are screening tests and then there are more detailed tests. So, for example, the screening test for thyroid is something called thyroid stimulating hormone, often abbreviated to TSH. So, the TSH is a screening test. It has a large range of normal from very, very low values, less than one, up to about, depends on the lab, but between four and five. So, this is the range, the reference range of normal. There's definitely an optimal component to this. And it's also interesting, we mentioned that sometimes reference ranges, the good part of the range, if you want to call that, or the part where people generally feel well. TSH is interesting because the good part of the range is actually lower. So here is where lower, although not too low, is better than higher. And the reason is that the TSH actually measures the stimulation of the thyroid, not the direct thyroid output itself. My favorite explanation when I'm trying to explain this to folks is I like to use analogies. I use them a lot actually in practice. And my favorite analogy for thyroid is actually a thermostat in your home and a furnace. So, in the analogy, the thermostat is actually the little center in the brain that senses the amount of thyroid hormone in your body, very similar to how the thermostat in your house generally is not directly connected to the furnace, it's somewhere else, and it senses the heat in the ambient air temperature. When the heat falls in the house with the thermostat, it activates the thermostat, and the thermostat starts to signal the furnace to make more heat. In the body, similar is true. The area of the brain that senses the output of the thyroid hormones, notices that those levels are falling. And in doing so, it tries to get the thyroid to create more thyroid hormone. And it has a little feedback loop. So then when the thyroid does it, just like when the furnace produces heat, well, then the thermostat switches off and everything settles down until the heat falls. Likewise, in the body, if the body is the thyroid specifically isn't making a lot of thyroid hormone, then that portion of the brain that senses that will be stimulating at very, very high levels to try to get the thyroid to do its work. And that's why in this situation, a very high thyroid stimulating hormone, high here is bad or not optimal, where lower is better. So again, sometimes already you can see that the thyroid is being more stimulated to work harder when it's not producing well. So sometimes the TSH, or the stimulating hormone, or the thermostat hormone, if you want to kind of call it that, those levels start to climb, and they can still very well be in the normal range, but already that person is experiencing some degree of fatigue, although technically the TSH is still normal. Now, again, the TSH is the thermostat hormone, if we want to call it that. It's not the actual output, but many times that's where the conversation ends. So again, people may be coming in with one set of complaints, looking for thyroid testing, and it's simply just a TSH. TSH does not directly measure how much actual thyroid output there is. And so from there, we actually need to look a little further. And this is something that can be done through the regular provincially funded labs. And we can look directly at how much thyroid output in the terms of T3 and T4. Those are the main thyroid hormones. But again, the story can actually be even more complicated than that, because there are other things that can interfere with the thyroid hormone activity in the body. For example, common problems are the development of antibodies to the thyroid gland. This is where, again, the body starts to attack itself, and it can interfere with function. And this, again, can produce fatigue. So, again, a screening test may miss some of these other nuances. And so, again, that whole picture can be important. And then finally, just to round out the thyroid and complicate it a little more, sometimes in certain periods, particularly under acute stress, the body can actually make a funny thyroid hormone called reverse T3. It's like a mirror image of traditional T3. And if you think, again, going back to analogies, because I love analogies, I want you to think of an expensive pair of fitted leather gloves, not the run of the mill box of 100 that you pick up, when you're picking up dog poop or cleaning your yard or anything like that. But I'm talking about an expensive, fine pair of leather gloves. The glove for the right hand does not fit the left hand. They are mirror images of each other, but they are not the same. So we do this. We make this thyroid hormone called reverse T3, but it is not the same as the regular T3, the active T3. And again, back to analogies, I want you to think of keys and a lock. So, say you have one specific type of locking system on your front door, and you have keys all from the same company. If the key doesn't fit the lock properly, it won't turn. Well, the same holds true with this funny reverse T3, this glove mirror image of the proper T3. If you have too much of that circulating or where it is, it can actually get into the receptor, like a key in a lock, but it won't turn the lock. But now it's occupying that receptor. And so the good T3 can't get in because the bad T3 is there. And again, if we go to the analogy, you can't shove the proper key in while the bad key is still in the lock. So these are some of the different ways that just conventional simple screening can sometimes miss when there are real problems going on. So if you don't feel right, I'm really trying to encourage you to discuss this with your primary care practitioner, understand what some of the nuances are, and then see what you can do to try to get a more detailed look at what things are when you get your blood work back. And because things change in time and it's only a snapshot, even if things appear normal the first time and the problem is persistent, you do want to go back and ask for more. It's not being difficult or demanding. It's being precise. It's being vigilant. It's prioritizing your self-care. So please don't feel bad. You can't know what's going to happen from one blood take to the next. So we have to test, not guess. So it's quite reasonable to go back. And I would encourage you to go back to your primary care if you find you have a problem and it's not getting better, even when you're told the values are normal. So again, these are all these considerations, and these are all the reasons why it's reasonable to go back and ask for more help and more care. Again, another reason or consideration when we're talking about lab values is we also have to look at relationships between things. So it's not only about the specific number on your report, but certain things have certain relationships with each other where they're in check and in balance. So let's pick another example. I always like examples because it makes it more real and more understandable. Estrogen and progesterone have a relationship with each other. When I'm talking about in the body, the impacts, just in very broad strokes, of course, there are more detailed nuances, but in general, estrogen is very much a proliferative or grow hormone, and progesterone is very much a mature and control hormone. So, again, if you think of a car, to operate a car, you need gas and you need brakes. So estrogen is like gas and progesterone is like brakes. And so sometimes we can have situations where people have issues around estrogen and progesterone. Sometimes it may be what we call like PMS, premenstrual syndrome, a lot of the mood related and not feeling well, and breast tenderness, anxiety, host of different things. Um, we can see other hormone imbalance issues that we kind of have termed estrogen dominance, again, where we have too much estrogen relative to progesterone. That can cause a lot of fibrocystic change in the breast. It can drive the growth of fibroids. It can create situations where periods are very heavy, and the like. So, again, when these things aren't in balance with each other, we end up with more issues as well. So, it's not just about the absolute number, but certain types of hormones and levels have interacting parts and components. We need to look at those as well, too, not just consider one in a vacuum and then take a look at the relationship. So it's tricky, it's complicated. So these are all the different things to have in your back pocket of understanding when you go in and you start talking about how you're feeling, particularly if you kind of get that discouraging feedback that your labs are normal. That isn't the end of the discussion. It really is only the beginning. So please, if you found that you've had trouble and you've done a little bit of basic blood work and it's initially been told normal, I know it's discouraging and sometimes it's hard to go back and repeatedly ask, but you're being precise. You're not being demanding. You still have persistent issues that are not yet explained, and further evaluation is needed. So whether that's you're not in the optimal part of the range, whether that's it was just a snapshot in time and things have continued and now something is more visible that wasn't before, or maybe it's the fact that there's a relationship issue that's out of whack between one type of hormone and another. These are all conversation points. So having normal labs and symptoms, it's not the end. It's only the beginning of the conversation. It's reasonable to ask, and I would encourage you to do so. Again, that's sort of the main take home message from today. A very collaborative ask with your primary care provider usually is all that's needed to try to keep that ball rolling. We here at the clinic do a lot of hormone work. If you find the door does not open for you with your own primary care provider, then we would also be happy to take a look and try to help you and get you directed that way. For more information or questions, that's where we would set up a personalized consultation. That's really not something that's appropriate in a podcast or on a social media reel. So we'd need to do that one to one. So, again, if there was something here that resonated with you, I really hope that it will be useful for you in your next conversation with your primary care provider and that you get some direction there. Please don't act directly on anything you've seen here without taking it into consultation because, again, we don't have the benefit here of knowing your full health history. If you have certain topics you'd like to talk about, I would love to go over those with you here. I'm just going to pull up a couple of places for you to look and to find me. So let me just bring you first to our website. So if you're looking for more information, again, I have a fair bit just down here on the QR code. If you go to scan that, that will bring you into the website and you can look at your own pace and just see what's available there to read more about. If you enjoy the content in the podcast, this is how you can subscribe and follow us. We've got the little code here again. And if you just pop that into the camera with your smartphone, that should help you subscribe. I'm always looking for interesting and fun topics to talk about that are meaningful and that can be helpful. So please reach out to us. I'd love to know what you'd like to hear about so we can cover it here. If you're interested just in general in more about hormones in particular, I'd love for you to take a copy of Longevanity. Sorry, not Longevanity. I'd love for you to take a copy of our book, Hot Flash to Hot Damn. It's a real focus into the approach and a new concept on how to look at hormone balance and order and protocol. And again, this may be something that brings you into some nice, useful tools to work with your own primary care provider. And then also, we have, even if at no cost at all, there's a companion workbook. So maybe this is the right place for you to get started. If you scan this QR code, it will bring you into a downloadable PDF workbook that has a number of different exercises to help walk you through having some of these conversations with your primary care, or a better understanding of how your symptoms may fall, so you can again ask those targeted questions. So ultimately, hopefully, that will get you in the direction you want to go. So, anyways, that's all we have for now. I just want to thank you for being along for the ride with us. And I look forward to seeing you next time on our next episode of Longevanity. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.